Okay, this is going to be one of these videos where I have to put it on both channels, so I'm just modifying a little bit the beginning of this video so that I can put it on the Rail Families United channel in addition to the UP-NS Merger YouTube channel. So this one has to do with Jamie Boychuk and also the fact that CSX has a new CEO. This is just going to be a very short video. I'm going to call it part 2 on Jamie Boychuk as one of the players. He was former CN Rail general manager when conductor trainee Jason Clooney was killed. He then went on to become the CSX chief operations officer, and very recently activist investor Ancora out of Ohio wanted to push Jamie Boychuk to become the next CEO at CSX. As I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, I had huge issues with the fact that Ancora, an activist investor, would try to put Jamie Boychuk at CSX as CEO, or quite frankly, in any position in the rail industry. Because Jamie Boychuk used to oversee the Alberta and Prairie subregions when he was at CN Rail as a general manager. And so not only was he there when conductor trainee Jason Clooney was killed, but he would have also have been part of the management team that was involved in the fake qualification of my own child, who was allowed to go from a rail yard of 2 or 3 switches a day, with 2 or 3 trains a day, to one with 40 to 60 trains a day, hundreds of employees, and potentially hundreds of switches, with 0 yard training. And if that was happening to my child, I suspect it was happening to a lot of people in the rail industry when the likes of Jamie Boychuk, Jim Vena, and more were at CN Rail. And so I had huge issues when I learned that Ancora was pushing to put this guy as Chief Executive Officer at CSX. He had previously been there as Chief Operations Officer, but I knew that I would do whatever I could to try and prevent that from happening. In my opinion, this guy does not belong in the rail industry at all. And if you want to know more on that, again, you can go to the UP-NS Merger channel or go to the Rail Families United channel, look at the entire series on operational excellence, the series on the brainwashing in Transportation Safety Board reports, and the series on deadly training materials. That would have all been under the likes of Jamie Boychuk and Jim Vena. And so I have issues with this person and several others, including Jim Vena, for good reason. In my opinion, they put the lives of frontline rail workers very much at risk in, trying to maximize shareholder wealth. Well, I'm an MA in finance, and this is not the type of maximization of shareholder wealth that we need. When you cut on frontline training programs, you violate numerous laws, including the Railway Safety Act, Section 20, over and over again, the Railway Employee Qualification Standards Regulation, Section 5, again, over and over and over again. Very likely the Safety Management Systems Act, which dates back to 2001, and some labor codes. So if I have issues with some of these people, it's for good reason. Anyways, when I went last week or the week before, I went to visit my brother in Ohio. I'm a U.S. citizen residing in Canada. And so I wasn't going to be going to the states of, Michigan or New York where there's Democrats, since my brother's in Ohio, and I have a nephew also in Ohio. I have a nephew in Michigan. I have another one in Florida, whatever, but that's too far for me. So I went to visit my brother, and while I was there, I basically very much decided to go visit the office of Jim Jordan, who is a Republican congressman who does a lot of he's chairman for the Senate or the House Judiciary Committee and does a lot of the investigations into corruption and whatever right now. So anyways, since he's a Republican congressman in Ohio and my brother lives in Ohio, and the office of Jim Jordan was on my way, I decided that I would stop in and see if I can drop off some documentation for Jim Jordan. When I first went through, couldn't get to his office, couldn't talk to anybody because now, the Hill has these security protocols. They want all these congressmen to have their offices locked, secured. You basically have to have an appointment to go in there. And I did not have an appointment. But anyways, more on that later. So when I went to visit my brother on the 24th, I placed all these calls from Ohio. The first call was to my brother. The next one was to, these are the last calls I placed. So you're going to see which calls I placed first. But I was trying everyone to try to warn them about the likes of Jim Venna and the fact that I had huge issues with that man becoming the CEO for a merged UP-NS corporation, because in my opinion, he's just as bad as Jamie Boychuk, and in my opinion, they both belong in courtrooms, not in boardrooms. You're entitled to your own opinion. I've done years of research and have plenty of documentation to back up what I'm saying. So then, let's see, I tried, the last person I called was actually Marjorie Taylor Greene. I tried Mike Lindell, who is, the My Pillow guy, who is a friend of Trump. But all these places that I tried, you can only go to voicemail. It was the most frustrating experience I think I've had in a very long time. The third number there, the 202-324-3000, that's the general number in Washington for the FBI. I tried the Office of the U.S. Attorney General, the Secret Service in Washington, D.C., the Secret Service in Ohio. I did talk to somebody at the Secret Service in one of these calls and was trying to explain to him what I'm calling about and that, President Trump needed to know about these issues and he needed to know about them yesterday. And so somebody had to get to President Trump, in my opinion, to let him know of these very critical issues pertaining to the rail industry in the U.S. Because, again, no less than 5 Class 1 rail carriers are impacted by all of this. And so, but I found that all these offices that I called, it would go to voicemail, couldn't leave a message. Well, I didn't want to leave a message because it just falls in this big black hole. And this was such an issue as far as timing of things that I didn't want my message to fall in a big black hole that may not even be listened to for weeks. And I had serious concerns with Ancora already pushing to put Jamie Boychuk as Chief Executive Officer of CSX. So did all these calls, Secret Service, when I was explaining to them what the issues were, well, we don't do that. And I'm like, well, don't you want to protect your president? Even his image when he's talking about Jim Venna and Union Pacific and stuff. I mean, it's not just his physical persona that you should be protecting. You should also be protecting how he looks on the world stage. Because in my opinion, if he doesn't know all these issues in the background, this could make the president look, pretty bad on the world stage when it comes to all these rail workers or the rail executives. And the fact that he clearly did not know a lot of things about a whole lot of rail executives that are currently in the U.S. So anyway, Secret Service, they basically said, no, we don't do anything like that. There really, in my opinion, needs to be some kind of a process where if you phone someone, you should be able to push it really high if it's a national security issue. And when it comes to the rail industry, it's absolutely a national security issue. You can't put the wrong people in these high-level jobs and not expect it to have an impact on the public, on the rail workforce, rail investors, and on and on and on. Just huge issues. And maximizing shareholder wealth, well, that should not be your number one priority if that means putting the lives of frontline rail workers at risk, as in my opinion, a lot of these rail executives have done in the past, and I suspect would continue to do in the future. Just my opinion. You're free to form your own. Okay, just a few more names you can see here. In addition to the Secret Service in Washington and Ohio, I tried that was another call to the White House Secret Service, then the White House switchboard. And when I was talking to the switchboard, I tried to get, even the press secretary's office or someone who worked in that office. Nope, can't talk to anybody. You can just leave a general comment. It was truly a very frustrating experience. I also called the CSX ethics line, the CSX headquarters. I tried everything that I could possibly think of, and still wasn't working for me. So I went another route. Now, I guess I'm just not a very patient person when it comes to these issues. But anyways, the day before that, on the 23rd of September, I had actually called the office of Jim Jordan, and even though he's a Republican from Ohio, the number I called was his Washington, D.C. office. And there I did get to speak to somebody. And I spoke to them for 26 minutes and 31 seconds. And I went through and I explained as much as I could to the guy that I spoke to. And I said, you need to have Jim Jordan tell President Trump about these issues. Somebody needs to warn them like yesterday. And so, I tried my hardest. I really, really did. And I told this guy, I gave him my phone number, and I said if Jim Jordan, because he was supposed to be in his congressional district that week, and so I said if there's any way at all that he can meet with me, I would meet with him at any time, anywhere, whatever. You just need to call me and let me know. And I still had not heard from him by Friday. And so I decided to go back to one of his offices and see if I could speak to someone in one of his Ohio offices. But I did get to this person, and he seemed to understand that this was a fairly critical issue. So hopefully he's the one who got to Jim Jordan and gave him a pretty big heads up for President Trump. And that might have helped push things along. I don't know. I can only guess. I know that in the past, when Jim Vena was running for CN CEO, that was in 2021. And back then, I had placed several calls to the office of Jim Jordan also, telling them, begging them, do not allow Jim Vena to become the CEO of CN Rail. So I'm not sure if Jim Jordan had played a role in having Jim Vena step down or not, or if that was the rail partners in crime, the government of Canada basically forcing Jim Vena to withdraw his candidacy for the CN CEO position. Not sure, but I know I had phoned Jim Jordan back then too, when Jim Vena wanted to be CEO of CN Rail. And a month before he stepped down, he was really gung-ho to get that position. So not sure what happened behind the scenes there for him to pull his candidacy. But then he ends up in the U.S. and I didn't keep track of him. And then he became UP CEO. I'm keeping track of him a little more now. But anyways, I was documenting 3 massive scandals that impacted U.S. national security. And folks, like my whole life has been documenting scandals. Because, if you're going to go up against players, the likes of Jamie Boychuk, Jim Vena, whatever, you better have your documentation that basically proves what you're saying. And so it took me years to put all this together, folks. But anyway, I did talk to somebody in the office of Jim Jordan on September 23rd, and I talked to that person for about almost half an hour. To my great delight, on September 29th, 2025, CSX announced that its board of directors has named Steve Angel as the president and chief executive officer, and that would be effective September 28th. And it says at the bottom here that the board conducted a very targeted process, and Steve was the clear choice to lead CSX. Okay, maybe it's just great timing. Maybe it had absolutely nothing to do with what I was doing behind the scenes, because, you know, if Activist Investor was already trying to replace Joe Henrich, who was the CEO at CSX, could CSX have already been looking for a new CEO? Absolutely. If they didn't want Jamie Boychuk to get into that position, absolutely. They could certainly have already been looking to address this issue. Hopefully, maybe the office of Jim Jordan got to President Trump, and maybe that was just the extra little push that needed to make this happen. But either way, I am thrilled to death that Jamie Boychuk is not the guy who's going to be the CEO at CSX. We can see here that after the CEO was announced, activist investor Ancora, who had been trying to push for Jamie Boychuk to become the CEO of CSX, put out a statement, and it was picked up by the Business Wire. But here they basically stated here, although Steve Angel is not a railroader by trade, his mergers and acquisitions pedigree and value creation record indicate his appointment is an initial step in the right direction for CSX. Because, you know, at Ancora, all we care about is maximizing shareholder wealth. We don't care about, you know, frontline rail workers and their safety, in my humble opinion. Because why would they still be pushing for Jamie Boychuk, knowing what they already knew, what I had given them over a year ago in April of 2024. So I had issues with Ancora, and for more on that, you can go to the UPNS merger YouTube channel, and you will look at what those issues are. But anyway, so it says here, we expect the board and Mr. Angel to be far more proactive when it comes to pursuing multiple opportunities to increase shareholder value, because that's all we care about at Ancora, in my opinion, and identifying a willing partner to merge with, because CSX, if UPNS does get to merge, CSX is going to be a pretty small rail company compared to all the others, and so Ancora is going to be pushing for CSX to merge with someone else. But I think they're going to be pushing for more than just that, because, you know, they own their shares in CSX. But it says here, furthermore, we with renewed leadership, we anticipate Mr. Angel will evaluate the full leadership team in order to restore the operational excellence that was a key tenet of CSX past success. Well, you know, that, in my opinion, is, we sure hope you're going to put Jamie Boychuk as your next Chief Operations Officer. That's what I'm reading into that one. But I hope to God that CSX will have the brains, and that the U.S. administration hopefully will absolutely be talking to rail executives to make sure that the likes of Jamie Boychuk do not get back in the rail industry. My humble opinion, the guy doesn't belong there. In my opinion, he belongs in a courtroom. There is no way that this person would not have known, along with Jim Venna, that CN was violating numerous laws when conductor trainee Jason Clooney was killed. And again, Jamie Boychuk was one of the first people, I think, that the health and safety officer spoke with after the death of conductor trainee Jason Clooney. He would have been the first one as the general manager overseeing that territory, whose statements was being taken after the crew, the three-person crew, was interviewed after Jason Clooney's death. So if Ancora has great plans for Jamie Boychuk to re-enter the rail industry in a top position, I'm here to tell you folks, if you are a rail family, if you're a rail investor, if you are a rail customer, in my opinion, get informed when it comes to the likes of Jamie Boychuk, Jim Vena, and so many others. Because you're not just putting, in my opinion, the life of frontline rail workers at risk, you're also putting the public at risk. When you have people that have so few morals when it comes to violations of laws, because they've gotten away with it for so long with their rail partners in crime, and when you've got these guys with billions of dollars behind pushing for these guys to get into these key positions, people are afraid of these big activist investors. Well, Mr. Activist Investor Ancora, I went to your location in April of 2024, met with your then chief operating officer, Lauren Turkisher, and then followed up with lots of emails, rather incriminating emails, pertaining to the death of conductor trainee Jason Clooney. So if Ancora wants to pretend they knew absolutely nothing of these issues, as an MA in finance, if Ancora keeps pushing for the likes of Jamie Boychuk to get back into the rail industry, in my opinion, that would be financial fraud. You cannot be asking all these investors to vote on your slates of candidates and try and push these candidates just because you've got your billions of dollars behind the scenes when you know that there are huge skeletons that are about to resurface. And in my opinion, if Ancora keeps doing this, they should get their butts sued by rail investors, and certainly by any family who loses a family member in the rail industry if Jamie Boychuk does get back into a role like Chief Operations Officer, or any role in the rail industry, in my humble opinion. Doesn't belong there, and I would say keep him out. That's my humble opinion. You can form your own opinion. Go look at all the materials that I'm posting. I think I'm up to about 55 videos. By the time I'm done, I'll probably easily have about 200 videos. So the issues are well documented is all I can say. So we will go from there. Do I care about activist investor Ancora's, to me, threat here at the bottom to Steve Angel? Because I see that as a threat, that we're thinking that you need to reevaluate the full leadership team. Ancora, that's not your business. That's up to the leadership team of CSX. I'm sure that Mr. Angel has the expertise that he will need to do the decisions he needs. I know he came from Praxair, whatever, but hopefully, he's got enough brains to know if there's a potential for being sued, would I really want the likes of Jamie Boychuk on my leadership team? Huge, huge question. So that's just my humble opinion, folks. Anyway, glad to see he is not the CEO at CSX. Buys rail workers a little more time and rail families to come to grips with these issues, and also for the Trump administration. Okay, so this is just a short follow-up video because I had already posted the first one on Jamie Boychuk. And regardless, even though I learned of the appointment of Steve Angel as CSX CEO, I only learned that in the first week of October 2025, and I had just posted, I think, the video basically on Jamie Boychuk when I realized, oh my gosh, we've had this new CEO appointment at CSX. Either way, I would still have had to do a video on Jamie Boychuk because he's such a key player in matters pertaining to the death of conductor trainee Jason Clooney, fake qualifications, and in my opinion, death cover-ups, violations of numerous laws, and on and on and on. So glad to see he is not the CEO of CSX. Let's hope he stays off the slate of the leadership team for any rail carrier, in my opinion. But just wanted to provide this updated video because I knew, okay, I just put this out there that, Ancora was pushing for him to become the next CEO. I don't think Ancora is necessarily done with Jamie Boychuk, in my opinion. I just can't see it, because why would they have been pushing for this guy to become CEO in view of what I had already given them over a year ago, in matters pertaining to fake qualifications and death cover-ups in the Canadian rail industry, and specifically at CN Rail. So when Jamie Boychuk was there. Anyway, so just wanted to give this updated video, and I'm sure there's many a happy rail family right now. So let's hope that Steve Angel does a good job at CSX. I wish him all the best, and I hope that he will know to stay away from people who should not be on their leadership team, in my humble opinion. So on that note, have a great day, folks, and I will see you on the next one.